You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. It is Friday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. It's time to talk a little bit of volatility. And man, we got something to talk about. Should be a fun time. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE, optionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which all of you folks are mainlining these days. Hope you're having a good trading week out there. It's been a bit of a tumultuous one out there, so definitely one for some of our savvier vol traders out there to pay attention, not really a set it and forget it type of week. So a lot to get to here on the show. Of course, if you like what you hear, this show, anything else on the network, and first off, if you're one of the handful who's just listening to Vol Views, make sure you listen to the full network. We know we have our devoted Vol Views audience. We love you all out there, but make sure you get in the full network. There's a lot of great stuff coming at you throughout the week. And of course, if you want even more great content in your lives, including, let's say, I don't know, you don't want the party to end after Vol Views on Friday. You want to come back for a little bit of Options Oddities where we dive deep into the weird and wild and wonderful trades that are lighting up our tape this week. Only one place to go. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go. Once you click on that, you get access to, I don't know, I've lost count, 300 plus episodes waiting for you there. Second you hit that button, you get early access to a lot of the other stuff that we do. Like I'm going down to OIC pretty soon, and we'll have a lot of great content coming from there. You guys and gals get all that stuff first. You get exclusive stuff like, of course, that panel I did with the Flow Master and a bunch of other great people over there at STA a few months back, as well as awesome giveaways, a whole bunch more live streams. TheOptionsInsider.com is the place to go /pro to learn more as we go around the horn and see who's joining us today. First, we return once again to the Southern Volatility Mecca, where we are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, how go things in the Southern Volatility Mecca, sir?
Happy Friday, Mark. Things are great. Interesting day. We've got a little bit of a tech wreck, but a rally in a lot of the other less interesting names.
Yes, a lot to parse there, and also joining us to help us parse all of this madness, we have the once future and now present Dr. VVIX, who's holding court over there at the KELLEY School of Business these days, and rumor has it may be working on a couple more books somewhere down the road. Mr. Russell Rhoads, welcome back to the program, sir.
I am always, as always, thrilled to be here, and looking forward to talking about. We've got, like you said, we got stuff to talk about.
Yeah, you picked a good one this week.
I'm excited about that.
So let's get to it. A little bit of the old volatility review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, listeners, let's sink our teeth into it because it's a juicy one this week. Coming into the start of the show, of course, the Volatility Review, listeners, a portion of the show where we break down all the action, lighting it up out there on the vol side from a trades, trends, analysis, unusual activity, all sorts of fun perspectives. As we alluded to, as we hinted to at the top of the show, there's some stuff popping off this week, listeners, including the much anticipated, perhaps hoped it would not happen, Israeli response to Iran. That happened, of course, in the overnight session there. There's a lot of people thinking things were really going to pop off in the open, and they did. We opened up from a VIX cash perspective back not just at a 19, not just at a 20 handle, even north of a 20 handle, isn't it? We got 21.33 is where we opened in the VIX cash. And then saner heads did prevail as we're kicking off the show here, listeners. VIX cash back down to about almost a 19, 1890. That puts it down pretty much a tenth of a point. It's pretty much unched on the week right now, listeners, which again, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know it's a fairly difficult feat to pull off. They have indeed been coming for a lot of the major indices, though. Well, I guess kind of depends where you're looking right now. But in the S&P land where we hang our hat, we are back below that magical, mythical 5,000 level in the SPX, listeners. That has been a talking point for a while. What happens when we break through it? Is it lookout below time or not? In fact, we have a poll question about this live right now. It went live yesterday during, I believe it was the option block, when this was still a bit of a theoretical prospect. We were still north of 5,000. We asked you folks in the audience, if we break through it yesterday or in the overnight or coming into today, is that a lookout below moment for the market or just another data point out there, listeners? And our audience actually 50-50. They're split. They can't make up their minds whether it's a lookout below moment or not right now. The market selling off for a bit. We got down to about 49.67 or so. Looks like in the S&P. Looks like we have gained some of that back now, back to about 49.88. Still off almost 0.5% in the S&P, and of course, still below that magical level of 5,000 out there, but not perhaps as aggressive as a sell-off as some folks might have worried about. And also, of course, given the news, people would have probably been forgiven for expecting a lot more. As the meatball alluded to, a bit of a tech wreck out there. NASDAQ taking it on the chin, off about 1.33%. And the Dow, the home of Amazon now, actually rallying out there, which is kind of interesting, up nearly 0.5% out there. And of course, not to be forgotten, our old friend small caps, kind of hanging out close to unched, up about 0.15%, which for small caps is a bit of a rounding error day out there today. So a lot to unpack. A lot of folks coming into today expecting a lot of vol on the table. Of course, we've heard the Fed for a while now, the last few sessions, also kind of adding some fuel to the fire. Fed governors, whenever they talk, you know my thoughts on the Fed speaking with one voice, listeners. Whenever the other voices start chiming in, always drives me crazy. A lot of those voices have been chiming in lately to say maybe we're not going to cut the rates, or at least not as many times as people were hoping for. So a lot of that adding fuel to some of this downside fire this week as well. So a lot of things to unpack. Let's go around the horn. Let's start with our guest, Mr. RHOADS, sir. What were you expecting coming into today, given the news that was popping off in the after hours? And is what you're seeing out there today, is that meeting your expectations, sir?
Well, I saw the headline before I saw the market reaction, which is kind of a fun way to do things. And needless to say, I expected the stock market to be down a lot more than it was. And part of me wondered if there was a headline where Israel lightly hit Iran, and Iran said, "Okay, that's it, we're done, we won't strike back," or something like that. Because I was just really surprised at the overall reaction. And then just deviating a bit from the volatility area to my first love, the Russell 2000, the small cap stocks. I came across an article this week that said that if you go all the way back to 1978, that the Russell 2000 is now slightly underperforming the S&P 500 for the first time over the long period of time, which makes me wonder if now is, if I should feel better about being long Russell, short S&P futures.
That has been your play for a little bit. Of course,
it's been painful.
Mostly because it's your namesake. You have to buy it.
It is. And I have so much Russell 2000 crap to send to you for the for the prize boxes.
It's like when I was a little kid and my grandfather showed me Mark Company for the first time. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Ooh. We had to buy some, and it promptly went out of business, I believe. So yes, long story short, don't invest in things that are named after you, sir. It goes poorly. Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. Coming into you today, were you expecting perhaps more of a rock'em sock'em robots day than we're getting, at least right now?
Well, I mean, we're getting a pretty ugly day in the NASDAQ, but we're seeing a lot of strength in oil, in consumer staples, in financials. So as we speak, the S&P is down 0.5%. The NASDAQ is down 1.4%. But talk about a well-timed rotation. RSP, which is the equal weight S&P, is now up about 0.5%. Now, this ETF holds the same components as the S&P 500, but it equal weights the different the 11 sectors via the ETFs. So, and then rebalances quarterly. So it is now, at the end of March, it sold off a bunch of tech and bought a bunch of, energy and consumer staples and you name it, and is rallying because we're seeing strength in the financials, and as I said, and in stocks like J&J and Procter and Gamble and ExxonMobil and Chevron. So the AXP, the boring names are having themselves a day. It's the NVIDIAs and SMCIs of the world that are absolutely crushing the market this morning, or this afternoon now. Excuse me.
Yeah, it has been fascinating to watch this play out. I was kind of like you, Russell. I was looking to see was there some other headline that maybe mitigated what was going on. This whole thing has played out kind of strangely from the onset. Us, of course, pre-announcing the Iranian attack on Iran. You don't often see that in geopolitics. Oh, these people are going to do this horrible thing in a couple of days, as if almost daring them not to do it, really, because the whole world knows, don't do it now. And they still did it, of course, and amounted to nothing. They came out afterwards, again, kind of unprecedented, Iran, and said, we consider this matter closed. It was very conciliatory on the global geopolitical stage. You don't really see that too often. And then, of course, Israel now going back the other way and deciding to rev up that engine again. Hopefully, this will be one and done on their part as well. The endless retaliation, I think, is what the markets were referring, of course, on top of the Fed and everything else. We are, of course, getting overshadowed right now, but we are, of course, in earnings season as well. So that also adding some interesting fuel to the fire out there right now. Let's see how the fire is burning on the VIX futures, shall we? And coming into the start of the show, of course, we had April rolling off the board this week. A sad trombone for those April 13 puts that you made us buy, myself and the Rock Lobster, poor Mr. Rock Lobster. He was choking on those as well out there. But yes, never let it be said we don't listen to our audience, even when it literally costs us money. You folks said those are a screaming buy, you should buy them, and we did. And they went literally nowhere. So, yeah, April 13 puts, RIP to them out there. And of course, RIP to April off the board, May in the pole position right now, June slotting up right behind it. Both of those futures right now up slightly, up about 1/4 point. Again, a moving target as it always is with the front end of the futures curve. If we re-rack these in 10 minutes, probably have a very different story. But that's where they were right as we were kicking off the show. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts out there on the VIX futures? And also, we had some brief moments of backwardation earlier this week. What were your thoughts seeing that? Haven't seen that in a little while, sir.
Yeah, we did. The market is telling us that we're going to continue to move. We've had, how many days in a row have we had this kind of partial backwardation where the cash is over the futures? It's been, at least, it's been since at least last Thursday. And the futures themselves, outside of, maybe a brief one-day stint, they've been pretty good about staying in a contango underneath the VIX, starting to behave like maybe that's going to change here shortly. Very interested to see how the day progresses, because it is definitely ugly out there. But when you have the cash over 4 months of futures, that is the cash index basically telling you we're going to get wild moves, which is hard to argue with at this point.
By the way, I like to give credit where credit is due. We had a listener write in, I believe it was on Monday on tax day, asking us when was the last time the VIX futures closed in backwardation. But I always like to give credit to people when they solve and answer their own question. He wrote back in a few minutes later, said, never mind, stop looking, I found it. It was back on October 26th of last year. So yes, it has been a little while since we closed, emphasis on closed, since we closed backwards out there, all the way to pretty much leading into Halloween last year, which was, of course, the nadir for a lot of the stocks out there, listeners. And of course, also the beginning of this near-term bull rally. We've had this aggressive rally in the S&P for the better part of the last 6 months or so. Mr. Rhodes, same question for you, sir. What's catching your eye out there in the vol surface this week?
Well, you're getting me all fired up. How do we define backwardation?
That is a good question. Meatball's talking about Meatball's talking about cash, obviously, right? And for a lot of people, they like to look more at the future side, right? Because
I mean, like I said, we're in kind of like I call it a partial backwardation.
Yeah, that's Mark in Texas. That's exactly kind of what I was thinking as well. Is I always I think the most important information is cash month 1, month 2. And if those are if those are in backwardation, if you can get backwardation from that, I've always thought that's how you would go about defining it. And then also that thing I haven't updated in forever, where come up with a consistent 30-day VIX future balancing the front 2 months. Whenever spot closes above that number, I've always thought that was a good backwardation number, a good way to define it as well. There's no chance in hell we're going to have backwardation between now and at least October, because that one's always going to be at a premium. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't say that the curve, if we have backwardation on the short end, isn't telling us that maybe the traders think that VIX is going to come in a bit. I don't think we've been in enough of backwardation that we're seeing an indication like that. A backwardation indication. That's going to be my new pop band.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because as Mark was saying that, I was like, I know
don't mean to be a dick.
Some smart aleck is going to write in.
So many ways
like,
you can.
The cash is not considered backward. I was envisioning that in my head as Mark was saying that. So you have preempted that. Let's hope. It's a thing that you wouldn't think would be controversial. What technically is backwardation? Yet I'm sure if you asked 5 different VIX traders, they would have 5 different definitions of what that is. So I'm glad we could. What do you think of, listeners? What is your technical definition of backwardation? Is it backward when just the cash is above the front future? Is that all it takes for you? Or does it take a little bit more? You need that real front portion of the term structure to really start trading above, let's say, the later portions of the term structure. Again, backward seems like a simple thing, but in the land of volatility, nothing is simple as we keep on rolling into the VIX options, listeners. Is it a banger week and indeed a banger day? The answer is yes and maybe. Banger week, definitely. We'll get to all that fun in a second. Today, again, you would be forgiven for expecting, VIX cash surging north of the 20, indeed north of the 21 handle for the first time in ages. All these rumors of growing geopolitical destabilization in sensitive areas like the Middle East, you'd be forgiven for expecting maybe a little bit more fuel to light that fire. And yet so far it's I wouldn't call it a raging bonfire. I would call it, you could cook some s'mores on it, but that's kind of about it. Only 494,000 contracts on the tape today. I say only because on most Fridays that would be a decent clip. The ADV, particularly when it was just last week or 2 weeks ago, was around 700 something thousand. 493 would be a pretty decent clip. You're almost pretty much to a full day's worth of paper. These days, things have changed. Obviously, the ADV surging this week. Almost 1 million contracts a day now. That's the ADV in VIX land. 912,000. That's up 104,000. That also, in and of itself, is an indicator, listeners. When VIX gets to an ADV of close to 1 million contracts, the game is afoot out there in the market. Things are popping off. Things are happening. VIX doesn't get to 912 ADV apropos of nothing else out there. So definitely a time to be paying close attention to the markets. Let's break down what's lighting it up out there from a top 10 size position in VIX options right now. And if you're coming here looking for some put action, some hot and heavy put action, you shall be disappointed, listeners. We are back to the 10 calls, no puts in the top 10, listeners. Read into that what you will. It's all upside all the time these days. Cost you 184,000 contracts to break into the top 10 right now. It gets you to the June 45s. So we start at the June 45s, and then we work from there, listeners. Number 9, 187,000 of the July 20s, the comparatively reasonable July 20s. Number 8, right back at it, 188,000 of the May 40s, 4 Os. Number 7, 202,000 of the May 25s. So there we go. A little bit of maybe some vertical action in May. I can get behind a little bit more of that than perhaps the June 45s, but I digress. Number 6, 213,000 of the AUG 47.5s. You know I love that strike, listeners. All this 47.5 action certainly brought a smile to my face over the last few months. Number 5, 215,000 of the June 35s. So June 45s not doing it for you. Allow me to present 215,000 of the June 35s. Number 4, 216,000 of the May 47.5s, right back to the nonsense. Number 3, 255,000 of the May 20s. Someone out there is sitting there listening to this saying, I own those 47.5s, and I'm angry at you. But I digress. Let's keep rolling. Number 3, 255,000 of the May 20s. Number 2, 294,000 of the May 18s. And the number 1 size position in VIX options right now. Go ahead, quickly. Take a guess. Listen, what do you think? Is it the May 20s? Is it the June 20s? Is it something else entirely? The answer is yes, it is something else entirely. It is 300,000 almost exactly of the May 35s, 35s. So read into that what you will out there, listeners, as it's time for us to read into a little bit of weekly options nonsense. Yes, it is time for Russell's Weekly Rundown.
Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown. Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown.
All right, listeners, so nice. We always have to play it twice. Yes, it is time for Mr. Russell Rhoads to hold court on all things weekly VIX options. Mr. Rhoads, you picked a good one. Some stuff popping off this week. What came across your radar, sir?
And typically expiration week is kind of a tough week to come up with weekly trades. So there was plenty to choose from. I need a copy of that because that of the music, because I want them to play that at my funeral before they start talking about me. All right, Monday, VIX 1926. Yeah, nice high number. Somebody came in and bought in 2 lots of 500 each, 1,000 of the May 15th 17 puts for $1.08. I think that's a pretty good trade. Probably get some drifting lower at some point. Then on and much like you said, you'd be expecting a lot of put action. Earlier this week, most of what I'm talking about is puts, and then on Thursday, Friday, it flips over to calls. Tuesday, VIX at 1836, using the April 24th options that expire next Wednesday. They bought 100 of the 15 puts for 11 cents, sold 100 of the April 24th 14.5 puts for a nickel, net cost of 6 cents. If they can get VIX 1450 or lower, next week's expiration, then they're going to make a whopping 44 cents. Part of the you said that somebody was going to be upset at you about the 47.5 options. Somebody can be upset at me. I don't like this trade at all.
This doesn't sound like this is not up your alley at all, sir.
You know what I mean? I don't like this trade at all.
How do you really feel?
Yeah, well, hell, if I had done this trade, I would have bought the 15 puts for 11 cents, but I would have waited because if we're buying those, you think the market's going lower or you think VIX is going lower. I would have waited and sold some other puts on some. I would have planned on selling some other puts on weakness against it, but giving myself the opportunity to let it run a little bit is where I'd be going with that. So yeah, I just don't really like that trade at all, and I've had people email me when I've gone through the weekly trades and go, "You recommended this." No, I'm talking about what's on the tape. So I'm gonna start being very clear what I like and don't like. And here's another trade I don't like. On Wednesday, I think a little bit later in the day, VIX was at 1816, and somebody bought 150 of the May 15th 15 puts and sold 150 of the May 15th 13 puts for 8 cents. That would be a net cost of 38 cents. Again, I question until the whole geopolitical situation in the world gets cleared up, but also it's an election year, et cetera. I just feel like VIX has got a lot of reasons to stay elevated, and trying to play a move under 15, especially in the near term, I just don't know if that's the best of moves these days. So let's talk about some trades that I do like. Thursday, VIX at 1829. Somebody sold 100 of the April 24th 21 calls for 33 cents, bought the 31 calls going up 10 points to protect themselves, and they had to pay 9 cents for that protection. Which think about that one for a minute. You got VIX at 1829, and the 31 strike calls, 12 points out of the money or so, almost 13 points out of the money. You got to pay 9 cents for those when they've got 3 trading days remaining. So they did this trade. They took in a credit of 24 cents. Longest VIX stays under 21. They're doing fine.
You like
a little
that
bit
one?
Later that day,
that one blows your skirt up. That's the one.
To what?
That one blows your skirt up. That's the trade that you liked.
I like it better than the other ones.
I guess damning it with faint praise a little bit. But
I like it. I mean, let's put it. If you think VIX is going to grind lower or not go higher, I'd be selling out of the money call spreads as opposed to trying to buy an out of the money put, planning on some sort of a drift, because VIX will hold its value. VIX is going to hold its value, every week until we're not worried about what might happen over the weekend. And don't tell me that VIX is not going to go up a half a point from where we are right now, just on those concerns in the last couple hours of today.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen literal weekend risk lately, right?
Yeah, weekend risk comes and goes, and we're back in a period where I think it's around, and it should injustifiably around. So real quick, just a little bit later on Thursday, with VIX at 1739, somebody sold the April 24th call, 20 strike calls, and bought the April 24th 25 strike calls, took in a 20-cent credit. And then earlier today, with VIX was at 1854, somebody sold the April 24th 19 calls for 49 cents and bought the April 24th 28 calls for 9 cents. Again, really expensive out of the money call there. They took in a credit of 40 cents. And these two trades were done within I think 3 minutes of each other. So I'm saying that we've got a bear call stupid, because which is not a term. But and then just a couple of minutes later, somebody sold 100 of the April 24th 18 calls and bought 100 of the April 24th 25 calls and took in a credit of 67 cents. So, kind of the same thinking there. Just 2 bear call spreads back to back, same size, and maybe a little bit better credit on the second one than the first one. So if that's the same trader, that's our first ever bear call stupid that we've picked up on ever.
Breaking new ground here on Vol Views every week. We just talked about stupids again on Options Bootcamp this week, and how little I care for them. And so you brought them back up on Vol Views, my favorite strategy of all time out there. As much as you love that selling of upside calls in VIX, I love the stupid even more, listeners. People are loving themselves some VIX options right now as well, listeners. Before I break down the week, I mentioned it was a banger week. SEBO also coming out with some data over there about last week, the 12th, 2.61 million contracts going up in VIX land. That's a lot. In fact, it's the most VIX options volume we've seen since another day you might remember back, in February of 2018 called Volmageddon. Now, when I say it like that, and that's the way SIBO put it out, it might sound a little misleading. You might think, oh my God, Volmageddon numbers. Not quite. It's the most active since Volmageddon. Volmageddon, I'm looking here, it's kind of hard to read with the chart. Looks like it was a little bit shy of 4.5 million, about 4.4 million, somewhere in that range. Friday, not quite those levels, but still a banger day, 2.61 million. So again, it shows you why this ADV is surging out there in VIX options right now. Nothing to threaten that right now, even though we came close earlier this week. This is kind of like a week in reverse. It started off really hot, and then it's ending with a whimper. We'll see if we get some more weekend risk. Last week was kind of the revenge of weekend risk, literally, driving the markets down, everyone freaking out over the weekend. We'll see if we have a recurrence of that over the weekend this week, listeners. Right now, though, it doesn't seem like a lot of people are really sweating this weekend. Only 493,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog out there, 39,000 of the May 15 puts, followed by number 2, 33, almost 34,000 of the June 15 puts. You might look at that and think, oh, bit of a roll from May to June, but no, we actually dug in, and it looks like it's actually a June 15-16 put spread that went up at least 20,000 times, and then the May 15 puts are their own beast entirely. Paper bought them outright 30,000 times for 36 cents. Could have been closing on that one out there as well. It could be just another flyer. You like those May 15 puts for 36 cents, listeners? Which way you going, buying or selling on those? I would put that poll out to you, but then we'd make us buy them again, and I don't want to do that. Even though 15s maybe a little bit more palatable than the 13s were not too long ago. By the way, let's finish off the rest of today. 32,000 for the May 28s, 29, almost 30,000 of the May 25s. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty light Friday, given all the things that are going on out there, 27,000 of the June 16 puts. Yesterday, also fairly anemic. Might be saying, where's all this volume coming from? Well, just wait. 680,000 on the tape yesterday. The big dog yesterday, 58,000 of the May 14 half puts. Interesting. So maybe if you don't like the 15s, listeners, allow me to present the May 14 half puts, listeners. Let's see, what price did those go up for yesterday, if my system will play ball with me? 27 cents. So 15 puts today for 30 cents, 14 half puts yesterday for 27 cents. Obviously, a little bit of a different VIX regime yesterday versus today, hence that similarity in prices. But intriguing stuff nonetheless. By the way, number 2, 50,000 of the June 25s. Number 3, 47,000 of the June 13 puts. Number 4, we've got 45,000 of the May 36s. And rounding out the top 5 yesterday, 37, almost 38,000 of the May 16 puts. Now we're getting to the banger days of the week. Wednesday, 917,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog, 62,000 of the May 15 puts, followed by number 2, 50K of the May 18s. Number 3, 37,000. We're back at it, listeners. May 75s. Haven't seen a strike like that in a while. That in and of itself is perhaps indicative of the game being afoot out there right now, listeners. 37,000 of those bad boys going up. Number 4, 32, almost 33,000 of the May 14 half puts. And rounding out the top 5 on Wednesday, 31,000 of the May 20s. Tuesday, a banger day, 1.52 million contracts on the tape. The big dog, nearly 100,000, 98,000 of the April 20s, followed by 83, almost 84,000 of the April 19 calls. Number 3, 76,000 of the May 36s. Number 4, 70,000 of the April 17 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on a banger Tuesday, 64K of the April 18s. Notice no April 13 puts to be found anywhere in there. Sad trombone, listeners. Monday, 1.89 million contracts on the tape there for Monday, listeners. So the banger day of the week. Obviously, not quite up to the Friday level, but pretty darn close. The big dog on Monday, 190,000 of the April 18s, followed by number 2, 125,000 of the July 20s. As you'll recall, we dug into these on the option block on Monday, listeners. Looks like that May 18, July 20 roll went up about 118,000 times. Like paper did it for 59 cents, $1.84 on the 20s in July, $1.25 on the 18s in May. So maybe doing a little bit of the old up and out. If that's the case, they paid almost 60 cents for that. You like that, listeners? You like that either roll or opening? Hard to tell because there's so much OI on both out there. And then number 3, we had 123,000 of the April 20s. Number 4, 78,000 of the April 18s. And rounding out the top 5 on a banger Monday, 75,000 of the May 17 puts. So a lot going up out here. By the way, those, if you're wondering, those May 18s, they opened those back on April 2nd. They paid $1.31 for those back on April 2nd. So they pretty much took the opportunity to scratch them and then rolled them out to July. Obviously, if they had maybe kept their powder dry a little bit, they could have got a better level, maybe actually made some money on the May 18s. But again, past is always prologue. So they scratched those and they kind of reestablished on the July 20s and paid roughly 60 cents for the privilege. Let us know if you like those. Mr. Meatball, speaking of liking things, a lot of paper going up this week. Anything coming across your radar that maybe you liked or perhaps did not like, sir?
You know, there was just a ton of paper in VIX this week. You know, lots of ratios going up, lots of stuff like that. Pretty interesting stuff. Trying to remember if there's anything specific that kind of got my juices flowing. But, you know, not really. Today, surprisingly, puts are kind of the leaders today. You got to wonder if people are starting to think maybe it's time to fade this. On Thursday, there was this big June 25 call buy. They bought, it looks like they did the June 25 calls tied to futures. That's probably doing all right here with vol going up. They did 50,000 of those. That's going to be a strike that's going to drive some interest. Biggest trade on Wednesday was the July 34, August 36 call spread. Looks like they pulled out of the July to buy the August. There was also a lot of puts, and you had a May 18-23 call spread go up for some size, and some May. Actually, they did a bunch of different stuff. That looks like they sold May 17, 16, 15, and 14 and a half put to buy the 18 calls, the 23 calls, the 20 calls, and I think they sold the 30 calls. So that was a banger of a trade. Pretty interesting, kind of a variance type of play. Not a lot happening. So what's interesting is the activity has been a lot of 10, 15, 20,000 lots. I didn't see any of these giant multi-100,000 lots except for on Monday when a trader traded the May 18 versus the July 20 call spread and rolled to July. It was tied with futures. So it's a delta neutral trade, another trade where they're kind of looking for VVIX to go up and volatility to move. That's really the only massive trade, unless you want to count the 50,000 lot from Thursday. But a lot of 10 and 20,000 lots, which is pretty interesting.
That it is, listeners, as we keep on rolling to the rest of the vol universe out here, listeners. Let's start in the Meatball and Mr. Rhoads' former favorite. They both kind of bailed on it. Let's see if they've gotten back in since. Good timing on the bailing because SVIX giving up the ghost back down to 35.4. That's going to happen, listeners, when VIX Cash pops back into a 21 handle, if ever so briefly. It was down more. Now it's only down about 0.6 of a point. So obviously SVIX recovering some of its losses from earlier today. Got as low as 34 and about 2/3. That's where it was pretty much coming into the start of the show. It has since rallied up to about 35.4. Putting up some numbers today, 3,600 contracts. The ADV still only about 4,000. So it's ticking up ever so slowly, up about 400 this week. So again, almost 10%. I guess that's not nothing, but it has a ways to go before it's really an options player out there. Mr. Rhoads, I know you kind of famously washed your hands of SVIX. This level, the 34, 35 level, have you started thinking about nibbling? Are you selling any puts or are you waiting for more?
I have not sold any puts. I did one of those stock repair trades a couple of days ago, and the short, and I did it with the options that expire today, and the calls are everything's expiring out of the money, which I'm totally fine with. But I was trying to maybe catch a little bit of a bounce on SVIX. I'm 1/4 of a normal position right now. So I always want to own a little bit of it. But I don't see any reason to rush into, to rush back into a full position in it these days.
Oh, see, I thought you were entirely out. Okay, so you have a little.
Yeah, it got called away from me. I'm not on every week, but it got called away from me. Goodness gracious, in the low 40s, and then I started buying it again when it was just below 40, and so I own a little bit of it. But yeah, I did. I was out for like a day and a half or 2 days. It was it was a very short period of time, and I was like, and part of it, and we're all human. Honestly, part of it was like, if this freaking thing goes to 80 and I don't have any of it, or something like, I mean, I know it wouldn't do it that quickly, but I'm like, if I don't make any money off of it and it goes up a whole lot because all I ever do is talk about how great it is, I should just go ahead and hang it up. So that's what I did.
So you were out of it for a whole day.
It got called away from me on a Friday, 2-3 weeks ago. And then I feel like it was like midday Tuesday. I bought it back. When it just dipped when it finally got a little bit below 40.
I think you need to go to SVIX Anonymous, sir.
Hello, I do. I need help. I have a problem here.
That's what this show is. It's a safe space. You can admit you have a problem. You can't go a day without not being long SVIX. Mr. Meatball.
And I'm a VIXaholic.
Yes, I'm an SVIXaholic. I can't get enough inverse vol listeners. People there looking at you like, what is this guy going on about? Mr. Meatball.
Thank goodness I've been on here before.
Yes, that is true. You have confessed your problems to us before. Mr. Meatball, same question for you. So I know you were kind of out, then you were dabbling a little bit. Where do you stand on SVIX right now? Are you back in like Mr. Rhodes?
Well, I'm collared. So my May 35 puts are starting to come into play here. The 45 calls, I'm probably going to be looking to buy back.
Oh, that's right. Didn't you want to sell the puts for like 10%? Didn't you want a level on the, wasn't it like $3 you wanted on those puts or something like that?
Oh, yeah. No, I basically did the risk reversal for even money, bought the stock for like $38. I'm going to cover the calls and let these puts cook.
Let the puts cook. May 35 puts, listeners. In SVIX. What are you folks up to? What are you slinging out there in SVIX? Are you sitting on your hands? Are you like Russell? Do you have a problem? You can only be out for a weekend and then you're back in. That just brings a smile to my face. Listen, as we keep on rolling, is UVIX bringing a smile to your face these days? The sibling product out there in good old vol land. It's from a volume perspective, it's certainly bringing a smile to someone's face these days because things are actually lighting it up out there. I was saying for a while, they need the weeklies out there. It does seem like the addition of those has definitely helped the game. We know you vol folks out there. You need your weeklies. You can't just trade monthlies. That's antiquated for you folks. That has definitely helped the volume. The ADV is now 26,000 contracts a day. That's up 7,000 from this time last week. Obviously, other things are going on in the vol space as well. Vol is popping. That's going to help. UVIX, UVXY reverse split, getting a lot of attention to the levered vol space as well. And then, of course, we have the weeklies, which are popping off out there. Again, 11 3/4 is where UVIX is right now. Kind of unched on the week, which, again, if you know anything about UVIX, that's a no mean feat in and of itself. It was a lot higher when we kicked off the show, was at about 12 1/4 or so. It has given up pretty much all of that right now out there. And speaking of the 12 handle, listeners, this looks like today is going to bring to a close the saga we have been watching since January 26th, when somebody came in and scooped over 20,000 of the April 12 calls in UVIX. We said it then, it's an unusual use case. We don't see it too often. People loading up on a ton of upside in UVIX. I mean, we see it obviously in other products like VIX, UVIX has issues maintaining upside, which is why it's not that frequent of a play. That said, if vol pops, UVIX can pop too. These had a couple of shining moments, I think, a week or two later where they could have pretty much scratched them, maybe made a little money on them. But after that, that was about it. We did hit 12 and a quarter today, though. So that a little bit of a tease for these people getting that close above your strike after all this time and then dropping back below it again. I just checked as of a few minutes ago, only 2,300 of these have traded today. So they have not gotten out of, even if that was all them, even about a tenth of their position. And looks like the biggest print that they hit them on, 500 of them for 30 cents. And then outside of that, it was pretty much a dime here, a dime there. So they pretty much, on the option side, obviously this was done against something else, listeners. They were probably heavily short, maybe some VIX, in which case they're kind of wearing it on that side of the trade too, but we won't read too far into that. Just on the option side alone, they're out almost $5.5 million on these calls. So that was a bit of an ouchie. Again, they flirted with them ever so briefly today, just to give them a taste. Like, hey, these might be worth something. And now they are indeed worth nothing again. So they had their moment to get a bunch off for around 30 cents this morning. That's probably all she wrote, unless we get another leg to this vol move today. But intriguing stuff. Mr. Rhodes, anything catching your eye out there in UVIX land? And also explain to our audience, why did you buy 20,000 of the 12s a couple months ago?
Oh, I don't know. Just, I'm still recovering from that brain injury, so I do stupid things like that every once in a while. I got no problem whatsoever with buying calls on UVIX today that expire next Friday. If I think things are going to escalate over the weekend, and in fact, if you're not comfortable trading index options, back in the day when UVXY was 2 times, I think that's a ProShares one. Correct me if I got the wrong product name on that one. But when it was 2 times, they actually showed that you got closer to spot VIX performance on spikes from a 2 times levered ETF than you would from the futures or any kind of option strategies as well. So keep that one in mind if you're worried about the volatility spikes over the next, going into weekends or whatever. It might be kind of interesting to see. I'm writing down all these things that I'm going to make some graduate students work on for me. And one of them is, what if you bought UVXY on Fridays and sold it on Mondays? Would it ever work?
That could be interesting. And that your use case you're laying down, I can get behind a little bit of a flyer for the weekend, because you're right. If something happens,
right. That's I feel like I know I can be inconsistent, but I feel like I've been pretty consistent when I talk about UVIX and UVXY as well. And honestly, my running joke when I do the ballroom things for SIBO was, if Vladimir Putin's going to invade a neighbor, I can't use that one anymore, over a weekend, buy UVIX. It'll be great. But you really got to be very specific on the timing. And it's got, if you had known that Israel was going to strike back overnight last night, I have not looked at the number, but I will real quick. How would that have worked? Well, it opened up a whopping, 36 cents. So if you had bought UVIX because you knew what was going to happen overnight between Israel and Iran, you'd have made a whopping 36 cents.
That 12 call guy, that's what he was planning for. He was just a few months off with his time.
Can I backtrack one thing? Because I'm dying to say something.
Sure, go ahead.
After I put the weekly list together, 1,000 of the April 24th 47.5 calls traded for a penny.
They're listening to the show. They heard me mock them, and then just to spite me, they came in and
I've been dying to bring up the 47.5 again. So there.
That strike just makes me laugh. Why you do it?
Why not? You love it.
Why not the 45s? Why you have to split the difference between the two? All sorts. Let alone how far out the money is. There's a lot of. I'd have a conversation with the 45s as well, but 47.5 just adds that extra little bit of something that makes it just that much more fun. Let's keep speaking of fun. You mentioned UVXY. We're already kind of coming up against it. Let's jump there as well. Hope you enjoyed our deep dive into UVXY last week. By the way, you were right, Mr. Rhodes. That is the ProShares version. UVXY hanging out at about a 40 right now, 39.90 actually, up about a third of a point Obviously, it was higher earlier in the day, 41 and about a third. This, of course, still vacillating around the 40 handle after this 5-for-1 reverse split from last week. Putting up decent numbers, I guess you can say today, 42,000. It needs a ways to go to hit its ADV, though, of 94,000, which weirdly enough dropped 13,000 from last week. So UVIX is gaining about 10,000. UVXY losing about 13,000. There we go. Is the conversion starting to happen? Take that, Mr. UVXY trader on the show last week. I'm just joking. All right, let's keep on rolling. Let's go out here. Mr. Meatball, sir, anything catching your eye in UVIX land? And also UVXY, you said you've kind of been lured back to that one now, post-reverse split. What's catching your eye out there, sir?
Yeah, well, with the futures structured the way they are, shorting these products, which is generally what I like to do, doesn't make a ton of sense. UVIX, yeah, it's up a whopping 30 cents up to 11.60. So the problem is it's not expensive enough to actually give you the juice. UVXY is back over $40. It's well above its reverse. Well, now it's not. It's 39.50. But it's well above its reverse split number. It is, both of these are actually picking up money every single day. In theory, they still move with the VIX futures, but the reason why people like to short these, that decay is actually working against you.
Yeah, it'd be a good week to have Mr. UVXY trader on again, see how all that short premium in UVXY is working right now. As you mentioned, of course, backward, it's kind of challenging time to be doing a lot of the strategies that people like. People love using these products to play the erosion. Not exactly popping off when the futures are backward. Mr. Rhodes, we haven't had a chance to talk to you since the reverse split. What are your thoughts on the somewhat meager but decent reverse split out there in UVXY? And has this lured you back to the dark side of UVXY at all, sir?
It hasn't lured me back to the dark side of UVXY at all. I stick with what I know, and I'm the old dog that's not going to try any new tricks at this point. So it's nice to see it's got a tradable level. I feel like it allows you to do a lot more option wise when we've got a nice bigger handle. I talked to one of the ETF guys, and I asked, is it an expense thing? But as far as every time that you have to split, if it's not an expense thing, why don't you guys do more frequent reverse splits and try to keep that price? Maybe when it gets down to 15, do something where you get it back up to 45 very quickly, just to make it for lack of a better way to put it, a more tradable product. And they said that really wasn't the reason. It was just more of a pain in the butt to do. But the splits don't really make me change my mind that much about whether or not I'm going to trade them or not. I did know, SVXY did a normal split. And that,
yes,
I'm still more of an SVIX guy, but SVXY did a real split where they had to lower the price.
What is that? I don't even know what that is in the vol space anymore.
I know. I was shocked.
So walk our listeners through that really quickly. What did they pull off, sir?
Well, I think it was a 2-for-1. I can't remember. I don't remember exactly. They did a bunch of them at once, where they did the reverse split in UVXY and the normal split in SVXY. Back on the X date was April 11th. It was a 2-for-1 stock split. And they have had to do a reverse one on this product once before, back in 2018.
Yes, April 11th. That's what ProShares likes to do. Like, they do them all at once. They did them all back on April 11th, make their lives. I'm with you. I wish they had a little bit more logic to some of their split schedule and how they did it and maybe the degree that they did it. But we got into all that last week on the show there. Mr. Meatball, anything else catching your eye? Also, our friend here, much maligned friend here, good old VXX listeners. Coming in at about a 15.20, actually up about a tenth of a point right now. Almost 100,000 contracts on the tape today, so maybe starting to recover. The ADV also 84,000. That's up 12,000. So still a pale shadow of what it once was, but getting some respectable volume out there. Mr. Meatball, anything catching your eye in VXX land, sir?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting back over 15 is good. There's a little action on it today. Got a trader buying the 14.5, 15.5 call spread for next week. tied to stock. Somebody today bought, or this was the 18th. I'm sorry. They also bought like 5,000 of the 13 puts in June tied up. So, seeing a little action today. May 14-13 put spread going up. Our trader from yesterday sold a third of their position, selling the 14.5, 15.5s for next week. Let me see if there's any action. Yeah, I mean, you know what? The option volume is really starting to increase in this thing, Mark. Every day I'm looking at, there's several 3, 4, and 5,000 lots in it.
You sound like a man that's about to get lured back to the dark side, sir.
No. I mean, it has some use case, but no, I'm sticking to SVIX and UVXY and UVIX.
And UVIX, yeah, that's the one I would be looking at outside. VXX has its place. Obviously, 100,000 people a day. Can't be too wrong. Well, they can, but in this case, obviously it works for them. The big dog out there right now, listeners, in terms of positioning, 14 half puts. There's about 43,000 of those bad boys that are going the way of the dodo today, with VXX flirting around 15 and a quarter. Intriguing stuff. Speaking of intriguing stuff, a lot of earnings vol popping off this week. We're coming up against it. Don't have time to get into all of that. Luckily for you, we cover all that on the website, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the options, news, and articles tab. You'll see all of our great earnings data, courtesy of our friends over there in RHOADS land. There's a lot of it. It's all popping off right now. So if you want to sink your teeth into any of these big tickers that are popping off right now, we're coming up in the next couple of weeks. Get on over there to the website as we get on over into the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, listeners, here we are at the end of the show, and VIX and the markets mostly haven't done a heck of a lot. S&P is off almost 0.5% still. NASDAQ off about 1.4%, still pretty close to about 1 1/3. The Dow up a little more, up almost 0.75%. But other than that, not a heck of a lot of evolution during our show. VIX Cash started the show close to a 19 at about an 1890 or so out there, listeners. It's at about an 1860 or so coming into this portion of the show. Actually taking down about an 18.5 now. Looking at where we were for this week, spoiler alert, no 18 handles. It was myself, it was the Meatball, and Michael Listman of UVXY infamy out there. And I was the highest at 17.25. So I was playing the Russell Rhodes role. But no joy for me. I was looking good until I wasn't today. Then Mr. Meatball, palindromic nonsense, 1661, no joy there. And Michael bringing up the rear at 14.75. All right, a long way around to saying I was the closest. I guess, you know what? I'll kick things off. I will go first. And again, it's the perennial question, listeners. Will this vol persist through the week until our show next week? You know, I'm going to say the answer is yes. I'm going to say the answer is yes. I'm going to say, but not as much as we have right now. I'm going to be a little higher than I was last week. I'm going to say 17. I'm going to go 1776, a little bit of American vol prognostication out there. All right, Mr. Meatball, you were the next closest. Excuse me, what were you feeling for this time next week?
You know, I'm going to go with, it's crazy, Mark. We basically, remember that yesterday on Option Block, I talked about filling that gap at 49.83, and we're at 49.78 right now. The 100-day moving average is down at 49, and I know I'm sounding like a technician. Go ahead and make fun of me.
Chart monkey.
But people pay attention to these moving averages. They do. And you know, that 100 is all the way down at 49.30-ish. So kind of interesting. I'm going to go with 1881. So basically here.
I was going to say right where you are right now.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Rhodes, you get the final word, sir. What are you feeling for this time next week?
Well, just and real quick, did I win a couple of weeks ago? I guess not.
I'll have to go check and see.
I thought I had a 1776 guess, and we were up in the 17s like the Friday after I'd made.
You
that,
were high.
So.
Again, you have to be within a tenth of a point. I'll have our producers go check. to make sure.
I think I won once. That's all.
If you won, we will proclaim it to the world on Twitter, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And come up with, a big announcement, music around it. It's funny you said 1776, because I was going to go 1812, just a tad slower than where we are. Am I, what's the average between you two's, 1881 and 1776? I'll do 1825. I'll kind of go in the middle.
Go
there.
1812. It's an American year. Not quite as good of a year for America. I mean, the White House burned, not exactly a great one. But hey, it's an American history year. I'll give you that. But 1825, not a year that's really deeply associated with American history in any way, shape, or form. But an intriguing one. There's your market for this week, listeners. Myself, the Goldilocks, some might say the accurate prognostication, 1776. Mr. Rhodes playing the middle role this week, which is a rare departure for him at 18 1/4. And the Meatball bringing up the upside. Again, kind of a weird reversal at an 1881. And let's go around the horn. Mr. Rhodes, sir, if folks want to check out what you're working on, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, I put up something. I put up a pretty nice systematic approach to trading NASDAQ on the NASDAQ website, NDX options on the NASDAQ website last week. I've got a little bit more of a follow-up that's going to come with that. And then, I know that we're all about U.S. volatility here, but I've just finished a pretty cool study on trading VIX versus V stocks. I've picked a mid-morning time. Teased out all the data to come up with a time where, the VIX has settled down a bit and VStocks is coming to the end of their day so that, we could do some analysis there. And they've got a good enough relationship that they're really good to trade against each other. So something coming out around that. And of course, anything I do, I'll throw out there on formerly known as Twitter X.
V-Stocks, you say. International Vol, you say. You are intriguing
I'm an
me, sir.
I'm the international man of volatility now.
We might have to discuss that in more detail next week. What do you think? You down for talking a little international Vol next week? Maybe put that on your calendar, Mr. Rhodes.
I could be here.
Listeners, we always wanted to talk a little international Vol. Maybe we shall do so if you are intrigued by such things. In the meantime, check them out over there on the old Twitter machines at Russell Rhodes, 2 S's, 2 L's, RHOADS, all one word. Man, that's a mouthful. And speaking of mouthfuls, Mr. Meatball's always got a mouthful of fun and or crazy content for you. Mr. Meatball, if they want to check it all out, where should they go? What should they do?
Go to optionpit.com. I'm putting out content every day. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm happy to... I'm happy, and tweet at me any questions that you have.
And that little birdie has told me the Rock Lobster has a videographer following him around today.
He does.
To chronicle his life for the masses. Sounds fascinating, so I can't wait to watch the documentary that is a day in the life, I should say, of the Rock Lobster. In the meantime, check all that out, listeners. Optionpit.com is the place to go. That is going to do it for us on the on-demand side. If you've been listening to us on your favorite podcast player of choice, that will conclude your broadcast week with us. Thank you for joining us throughout the week. Remember, if you missed anything, it's all available for you there. 17 plus years worth of content for you to go back and check out at your leisure. Of course, if you don't want your broadcast week to end, you want to come back, you want to check out some fun options oddities, well then head on over to the pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. is the place to go to learn more. Then we're back again on Monday with the old OB all the way through to next Friday. Another episode of Volatility Views. And I say it every week. We've got some literal weekend risk in the offing these days, so I mean it doubly this week. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's MIXLR.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/The Options Insider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.